The marketplace buzzed with the usual chaos of midday trading vendors shouting their wares, children weaving between stalls, the mingled scents of fresh bread and herbs thick in the autumn air. I moved through it all like a ghost. My basket of medicinal supplies clutched close to my chest, my eyes fixed on the cobblestones beneath my feet. Invisible. That's what I'd become in the 5 years since losing my voice. Invisible to everyone except those who needed something from me, a poultice for infection, a tincture for fever, hands that could heal what words could not. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. My name is Lyra Ashwood, though few bothered to use it anymore. The mute healer was sufficient. That silent Omega girl, sometimes just pointing and a dismissive gesture, as if I were an object rather than a person. The Silver Crest. Pack had taken me in after the rogue attack that killed my family and stole my voice when I was 15. I should have been grateful many orphaned Omegas ended up far worse, but gratitude felt hollow when you spent every day being looked through rather than at. I was reaching for a bundle of dried lavender when I heard the laughter. Sharp, cruel, the kind that made my wolf curl in on herself protectively. "Look, it's the broken Omega," a familiar voice called out. Cassandra Nightshade, daughter of the Pack's Beta, stood with 3 of her friends near the spice merchant's stall. All of them were dressed in fine silks, their hair elaborately styled, everything about them screaming status and privilege, everything I wasn't. I tried to turn away, to pretend I hadn't heard, but Cassandra's hand shot out and grabbed my arm. Her perfectly manicured nails dug into my skin as she spun me to face her. "Where are you going?" she demanded, her voice sugary sweet in that way that always preceded cruelty. "We were just talking about you." My hands moved automatically, signing a polite greeting. It was a habit I'd developed trying to communicate even though most wolves couldn't or wouldn't understand sign language. Cassandra's eyes narrowed as she watched my fingers form the shapes. Then she laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Look at her hands," she said to her companions, mimicking my signs with exaggerated, mocking gestures. "Flapping around like a fish out of water. Does she actually think anyone cares what she has to say?" Heat flooded my cheeks as the other girls joined in her laughter. A small crowd was beginning to form, Pack members pausing in their shopping to watch the spectacle. No one intervened. They never did. "Maybe she's casting spells," one of Cassandra's friends suggested with false concern. "Isn't that what witches do? Move their hands around mysteriously?" "She's not a witch, just defective," Cassandra corrected, her grip on my arm tightening. "A broken Omega who thinks she's special because she can mix a few herbs together." I pulled against her hold, but her strength far exceeded mine. Cassandra was a full-ranked she-wolf, trained in combat. I was Omega, the lowest rank, considered too weak to be worth training in anything but servitude and healing. My supplies scattered across the cobblestones as my basket fell from my trembling hands. Carefully dried plants I'd spent weeks gathering, crushed beneath careless feet as the crowd pressed closer. "Oh, how clumsy," Cassandra cooed, releasing my arm with a shove that sent me stumbling. "You should be more careful with pack resources. Omega. Those herbs cost money." I dropped to my knees, frantically trying to salvage what I could. My eyes burned with unshed tears, but I refused to let them fall. That would only give Cassandra more ammunition, more proof of my weakness. "Pathetic," I heard her mutter above me. "I don't know why Alpha Marcus even tolerates her. Presence. She contributes nothing." The words cut deeper than any physical wound could have, because part of me feared they were true. What was I without my voice, without the ability to defend myself, to explain, to be heard? My hands found the small leather journal I always carried, my only means of communication with those who wouldn't learn sign language. But before I could retrieve it, a boot came down on my fingers, not hard enough to break bones, but enough to send pain shooting up my arm, enough to make my wolf howl in silent anguish within me. "Oops," Cassandra said, though the malice in her eyes showed it was anything but accidental. "I didn't see you there." But then, no one really does, do they? Something inside me cracked. Not broke, I'd been broken for 5 years. This was different. This was the moment when survival stopped being enough, when I realized that existing in the shadows was its own kind of death. I looked up at Cassandra, meeting her gaze directly for the first time in our long acquaintance. My hands moved, forming signs with deliberate, unmistakable clarity. "You mistake silence for weakness. You'll regret that." She couldn't understand the signs, of course, but my eyes must have conveyed enough because her expression flickered with something that might have been uncertainty before hardening into renewed cruelty. "Is she threatening me?" Cassandra asked the crowd with mock outrage. "Did everyone see that?" The mute Omega just step away from her. The voice cut through the marketplace noise like a blade through silk, deep, commanding, carrying an authority that made every wolf present freeze instinctively. The crowd parted immediately, revealing 3 figures who could only be described as radiating power. But my attention fixed on the one in the center, the one whose voice had issued that command. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of kingdoms. Dark hair fell to his collar, framing a face that was all sharp angles and controlled strength. But it was his eyes that held me captive, amber shot through with gold, currently fixed on Cassandra with an intensity that made her take an involuntary step backward. Alpha King Theron Stormcrown. I'd only seen him once before, years ago, when he'd visited our territory on official business. He ruled the Northern Kingdom, a coalition of 12 packs, with a reputation for being ruthless but fair, powerful but just. And he was staring at Cassandra Nightshade like she was something he'd found on the bottom of his boot. "My king," Cassandra stammered, immediately dropping into a submissive bow. "I didn't realize we were just tormenting a pack member half your size." Theron's voice was deceptively soft, which somehow made it more terrifying. "Yes, I saw exactly what you were doing." He moved past Cassandra, as if she were irrelevant, crossing the distance to where I still knelt among my scattered supplies. His companions, both powerful-looking males, I assumed were his, Beta and Third, remained at the edge of the crowd, their presence ensuring no one would dare interfere. Theron crouched before me, bringing himself to my eye level. The movement was fluid, graceful despite his size. Up close, I could see the faint scars that marked his face and hands, evidence of battles won and leadership earned through strength. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice gentler than I would have thought possible from someone with such a fearsome reputation. I shook my head, not trusting myself to sign while my hands were still trembling. His gaze traveled to my scattered supplies, to my reddened fingers where Cassandra's boot had landed, to the tears I was fighting so hard to contain. Something shifted in his expression. A flash of something that might have been anger or possibly recognition. "Your name?" he prompted. I reached for my fallen journal with shaking hands, aware of every eye in the marketplace, watching this interaction. The Alpha King, kneeling in the dirt with a lowly Omega. It was unprecedented, scandalous. Before I could write anything, Theron spoke again. "Wait." He studied my face more intently, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You're mute." It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway, preparing to write my explanation. Everyone always needed an explanation, as if my silence were a personal affront that required justification. Instead of disgust or dismissal, something unexpected crossed his features. His hands rose, and he began to sign. I asked your name. The world stopped. My journal slipped from nerveless fingers as I stared at this powerful Alpha King, this ruler of territories, signing to me in perfect, fluent sign language. Not the simplified gestures some wolves learn to communicate basic commands, but the complex, nuanced language my mother had taught me as a child. My hands moved automatically, responding before my shocked brain could catch up. Lyra Ashwood. Beautiful name, he signed, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Why are you on the ground, Lyra Ashwood? The question, delivered in sign language that showed he saw me, truly saw me as a person worthy of communication, broke something loose in my chest. I hesitated, unsure how to explain without sounding pathetic. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything, and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. They mocked you, Theron supplied, his expression darkening as his hands moved with increasing sharpness. For using sign language, for being mute, for existing as anything other than what they deemed acceptable. I nodded, tears finally spilling over despite my best efforts to contain them. Theron rose to his full height, his posture shifting into something that radiated barely contained fury. When he turned to face Cassandra and the assembled crowd, I saw why other alphas reportedly avoided direct confrontation with him. He looked absolutely lethal. Let me make something abundantly clear, he said aloud, his voice carrying to the corner of the marketplace. Sign language is not a deficiency. It is a language as valid and valuable as any spoken tongue. His gaze swept across the crowd, landing on each person who had laughed or stood by while I was humiliated. I learned it from my younger sister, who lost her hearing in the same attack that killed our parents. She taught me that communication isn't about the method, it's about the willingness to understand. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, shame beginning to color several faces. But Theron wasn't finished. He looked directly at Cassandra, who had gone pale beneath her carefully applied cosmetics. What I witnessed here today was not pack behavior. It was cruelty masquerading as superiority. It was cowardice hiding behind rank. His voice dropped to something dangerous. And it will not be tolerated in any territory I have authority over. But my king, Cassandra tried, her voice shaking. She's just an Omega. I didn't mean she is a member of this pack. Theron cut her off sharply. And more than that, his hands rose again, signing as he spoke so that both I and the crowd could understand. She is mine to protect. Any who harm her, mock her, or treat her as less than she is, will answer to me personally. The marketplace fell absolutely silent. The declaration hung in the air like lightning about to strike. Yours? I signed without thinking, confusion and disbelief warring in my chest. Theron turned back to me, and his expression softened into something I couldn't quite name, something that made my wolf stir with cautious interest for the first time in years. Mine, he confirmed, his hands moving with absolute certainty, though perhaps that requires some explanation. Walk with me? He extended his hand, not commanding, but offering. A choice. I stared at that outstretched hand, at the Alpha King who had defended me when no one else would, who had communicated with me in my own language, who had called me his in front of an entire pack. My world had shifted on its axis in the span of heartbeats. Around us, the crowd remained frozen, processing what they'd witnessed. Cassandra looked like she might be sick. Several pack members had expressions of dawning horror as they realized they'd just stood by, while an Omega under the Alpha King's protection was tormented. I should have been afraid, should have been overwhelmed. Instead, for the first time in 5 years, I felt something dangerously close to hope. My hand found his, small and calloused from herb gathering against his larger, scarred palm. His fingers closed around mine with surprising gentleness. Thank you, I signed with my free hand. Don't thank me yet, he replied, a hint of something that might have been humor in his expression. I have a proposition for you that will likely complicate your life considerably. Before I could ask what he meant, his beta approached, speaking too quietly for me to hear. Theron's jaw tightened as he listened, and I felt his hand tense around mine. When he turned back to me, his expression had hardened into something grimly determined. It seems your Alpha Marcus is requesting an audience, he signed, about me interfering with pack discipline. This should be interesting. The way he signed interesting suggested he thought it would be anything but pleasant. As Theron led me through the parting crowd, his hand never releasing mine, I caught sight of Cassandra's face. The malice there promised that whatever happened next, she would make me pay for this humiliation. But for the first time, I wasn't facing my tormentors alone. For the first time, someone powerful enough to matter had truly seen me, and called me worthy of protection. I didn't yet understand what Theron meant by calling me his, or what proposition he intended to make. I didn't know why the Alpha King of the Northern Kingdom had been in our territory at all, or how he'd learned such fluent sign language. What I did know was that my life had just changed irrevocably, and somehow, despite the fear and uncertainty churning in my stomach, I felt more alive than I had since the day I lost my voice. The walk to Alpha Marcus's office felt like a march toward judgment. Theron's hand remained firmly wrapped around mine, his thumb occasionally brushing against my knuckles in what might have been reassurance or simply absent-minded habit. His beta and third flanked us, their presence ensuring that the pack members who lined our path kept a respectful distance. I could feel their stares curious, shocked, some openly hostile, an Omega walking hand in hand with the Alpha King through the heart of pack territory. It was unthinkable. Scandalous. Breathe. Theron signed with his free hand, not breaking stride. Your scent is spiking with anxiety. I hadn't realized he could smell my fear. Of course he could. Alpha senses were far more acute than Omega ones. The thought made embarrassment flood through me. adding another layer to my distress. Sorry, I signed back. His steps slowed slightly, and he turned to look at me, golden eyes serious. Never apologize for honest emotion. Fear is natural when facing the unknown. You're not afraid, I observed. A slight smile crossed his features. I've faced down rogue armies and territorial challenges from alphas twice my size. Your alpha Marcus doesn't particularly concern me. He paused. But I understand he concerns you. That's different. We reached the pack house, a sprawling stone structure that served as both Alpha Marcus's residence and the administrative center of Silvercrest Pack. I'd been inside only a handful of times, always through the servants' entrance, always to deliver healing supplies or tend to someone too important to visit the healer's cottage. The main entrance was flanked by guards who straightened immediately upon seeing Theron. One of them, a grizzled warrior named Garrett who had always been kind to me, looked between the Alpha King's face and our joined hands with barely concealed surprise. Alpha King Theron, Garrett said formally, bowing his head. Alpha Marcus is expecting you in his study. Thank you, Theron replied, his tone cordial but brooking no delay. As we passed through the entrance, I tried to pull my hand free. It felt presumptuous to walk through the pack house like this, connected to the Alpha King as if I had any right to his attention or protection. Theron's grip tightened, not painfully, but firmly enough to prevent my withdrawal. Stay, he signed simply. I meant what I said in the marketplace. But I don't understand why, I signed back, frustration bleeding into the gesture. You don't know me. We've never even met before today. Something flickered across his expression, a secret perhaps, or a truth he wasn't yet ready to share. That's not entirely accurate, he signed. But this isn't the time for that conversation. First, we deal with your alpha. Before I could press for clarification, we arrived at the study. The beta, whose name I'd learned was Darius, knocked once and pushed the door open without waiting for a response. Alpha Marcus sat behind an imposing desk of dark wood, his silver-streaked hair pulled back from a face lined with authority and, currently, poorly concealed anger. He wasn't alone. Beta Nightshade, Cassandra's father, stood to his right, while the pack's third, a severe woman named Moira, occupied the left position. All three rose as Theron entered, performing the minimal bow required when one alpha greeted another of equal or greater rank. Alpha King Theron, Marcus said, his voice tight with false pleasantry. What an unexpected visit. Though I confess I'm uncertain why you felt the need to bring one of our Omegas to this meeting. His gaze flickered to me with thinly veiled disdain, as if my presence soiled his office. Lyra Ashwood is the reason for my visit, Theron replied, his tone deceptively mild as he guided me to stand beside him rather than behind. And for what I'm about to propose. Marcus's expression hardened. With respect, my king, pack discipline is an internal matter. If one of our Omegas has troubled you, troubled me? Theron's eyebrows rose. Is that what you think occurred? My daughter mentioned an incident in the marketplace. Beta Nightshade interjected, his voice carrying an edge of defensiveness. Some misunderstanding between pack members that you apparently witnessed. There was no misunderstanding, Theron said, his voice dropping to a register that made even Alpha Marcus shift uncomfortably. I witnessed a pack member being tormented for using sign language to communicate. I witnessed others standing by while she was physically and verbally assaulted. And I witnessed none of you, his gaze swept the three ranking wolves, stepping in to prevent it. The Omega is mute, Moira said, her tone suggesting this explained everything. She has certain limitations that make full pack integration difficult. She has a name, Theron corrected sharply. Lyra. Use it. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Alpha Marcus leaned forward, his hands pressed flat against the desk. My king, I understand you have a personal history with sign language due to your sister's condition, but surely you can understand that in pack hierarchy, certain behaviors must be maintained. Omegas exist at the bottom for evolutionary reasons. They're not meant to lead or draw attention to themselves. And tormenting them keeps them in their place? Theron's voice had gone dangerously soft. Is that the philosophy by which you run Silvercrest? We maintain order, Marcus replied stiffly. The Omega girl is fed, housed, and put to use in the healing cottage. She has more than many in her position could hope for. I felt my stomach twist with familiar shame. This was the argument I'd heard countless times, spoken and unspoken. I should be grateful. I should accept my place. should stop wanting more than survival. Theron's hand squeezed mine once, firmly, before releasing it. His hands rose, signing as he spoke so that both I and the others could understand, though they likely wouldn't comprehend the signs. Let me tell you what I see when I look at Lyra Ashwood. I see a healer skilled enough that even I have heard whispers of her abilities. I see someone who has survived trauma that would have broken wolves twice her size. I see intelligence, courage, and a spirit that refuses to be extinguished despite years of being treated as less than she is. He turned slightly, including me in his gaze as his hands continued to move. I see my fated mate. The words both spoken and signed hung in the air like a bomb waiting to detonate. I stopped breathing. My heart, which had been racing, seemed to stop entirely. What? My hands moved automatically, shock overriding all other thought. Theron's expression softened as he looked at me. His signs meant only for my eyes now. I've known since the moment I caught your scent in the marketplace. My wolf recognized yours instantly. You're my true mate, Lyra. The room erupted. Impossible. Beta Nightshade sputtered. A mute Omega cannot be the mate of an Alpha King, Moira said flatly, as if stating an immutable law of nature. Alpha Marcus had gone very still, his expression calculating. My king, are you certain? Fated mate bonds are rare, and the differences in rank are irrelevant. Theron cut him off, turning back to face the pack leadership. The bond doesn't care about rank, status, or ability to speak. It cares about souls that complement each other. His voice hardened. Though I'm beginning to understand why Lyra's wolf has been so suppressed. It's difficult for a mate bond to manifest fully when one half of the pair is being systematically broken down. We have done no such thing, Marcus objected. Haven't you? Theron gestured to me. When was the last time anyone in this pack used her name instead of the mute Omega or the broken one? When was the last time someone learned sign language to communicate with her properly instead of treating her inability to speak as a personal inconvenience? His questions hung unanswered because everyone in that room knew the truth. If you truly believe she's your mate, Marcus said slowly, clearly trying to navigate treacherous diplomatic waters, then of course the pack would never stand in the way of such a sacred bond. How generous, Theron replied dryly. I'm certain your sudden cooperation has nothing to do with the political implications of denying an Alpha King's mate claim. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he didn't rise to the bait. However, Theron continued, there are protocols to observe. Traditional mate claims require certain elements, especially when they cross pack boundaries. He glanced at me, something almost like apology in his expression. Lyra would need to consent to leave Silvercrest and join my pack. She would undergo the bonding ceremony at my territory, and there would be a traditional courtship period to ensure the bond is genuine and mutual. You want me to leave? I signed, trying to process everything that had been said in the last few minutes. Leave Silvercrest? I want you safe, happy, and treated as you deserve. Theron signed back. But the choice is yours. I won't force you into anything. The Omega cannot make such a decision. Beta Nightshade objected. She has no family to speak for her interests, no ranked wolf to negotiate on her behalf. She can speak for herself perfectly well, Theron said sharply, his hands rising again. In sign language, which I understand fluently. Or do you suggest that her method of communication is less valid than yours? The challenge in his tone dared anyone to argue. No one did. Theron turned to me fully, blocking the others from my view. His hands moved with careful deliberation, ensuring I understood every sign. I know, this is overwhelming. I know you need time to process. But I need you to understand something. I didn't come to Silvercrest by accident. I've been searching for you for 3 months, ever since I caught a trace of your scent at the Healers' Council gathering. My eyes widened. I'd attended that gathering briefly, delivering supplies for our pack's head healer. I hadn't spoken to anyone, hadn't drawn any attention to myself, or so I'd thought. You were standing in the herb garden, he continued, signing to yourself as you identified different plants. I saw you for maybe 30 seconds before you disappeared into the crowd, but my wolf knew. He knew you were mine. Why didn't you approach me then? I asked, my hands trembling. Because I needed to understand your situation first. I made inquiries, learned about your pack, your position, how you were treated. His expression darkened. I needed to see it for myself before I could act, and what I saw in that marketplace confirmed my worst suspicions. So you're saving me, I signed, trying to keep the bitterness from the gesture. Out of obligation, because fate says you must. No, he said aloud, firmly, before signing again. I'm offering you a choice. Stay here, where you're invisible and undervalued, or come with me and discover what you could become when you're truly seen. As your mate, I signed. As yourself, he corrected. The mate bond is sacred, but I won't force it. If you choose to come with me, we'll explore the connection at your pace. If you ultimately decide I'm not right for you, despite what our wolves say, I'll help you establish yourself wherever you wish to go. I studied his face, searching for deception or hidden motives, but all I saw was sincerity and something deeper that my wolf recognized even if I didn't fully understand it yet. Behind Theron, I could see Alpha Marcus and his advisors watching our signed conversation with growing frustration. They couldn't understand what was being discussed, couldn't control a negotiation they couldn't follow. For once, my silence gave me power, instead of taking it away. If I say yes, I signed slowly. When would I leave? Tonight, Theron replied without hesitation. I won't leave you here any longer than necessary, not after what I witnessed. Pack your belongings, everything that matters to you. My beta will escort you to ensure no one interferes. They'll say you're stealing me, taking pack property. Let them try to stop me, he signed, and the confidence in the gesture sent an unexpected thrill through me. I turned away from him, forcing myself to look at the 3 wolves who had governed my existence for the past 5 years. Alpha Marcus, who had taken me in but never truly welcomed me. Beta Nightshade, whose daughter had made my life miserable. Moira, who had always looked at me as if I were a problem to be managed rather than a person to be valued. None of them had ever asked what I needed, what I wanted, what I dreamed about in the Mori. Long, silent hours of night. They had given me survival. Theron was offering me something I'd thought lost forever. A voice. I looked back at the Alpha King, at this man who had learned an entire language to speak with his deaf sister, who had spent months searching for me, who had publicly defended me against wolves of higher rank without hesitation. My hands rose, forming signs that felt like stepping off a cliff into unknown territory. Yes, I'll come with you. Theron's face transformed, a smile breaking across his features that made him look younger, less burdened by the weight of leadership. Lyra has agreed to leave Silvercrest and join my pack, he announced to the room, his voice carrying unmistakable satisfaction. We'll observe a traditional courtship period, after which, if she still consents, we'll complete the mating bond. This is highly irregular, Moira protested, and yet entirely within my rights as Alpha King, Theron countered. Or do you wish to dispute a fated mate claim before the Council of Alphas? The threat was clear. If Silvercrest challenged this, it would become a matter for the highest governing body of all packs. A dispute they would inevitably lose, while earning the enmity of the Northern Kingdom's ruler. Alpha Marcus performed some rapid mental calculation, and came to the obvious conclusion. Of course not, my king. We would never stand between fated mates. His smile was forced, his eyes cold. Though, I must say, this is quite a loss for our pack. Lyra's healing skills will be missed. I'm certain you'll manage, Theron said dryly. Darius, please escort Lyra to collect her belongings. Ensure no one impedes her or makes her feel unwelcome. The beta stepped forward, offering me a slight bow that was more respect than I'd received from any ranked wolf in years. It would be my honor, miss. As I moved toward the door, Theron's hand caught mine once more. Are you certain? He signed. Last chance to reconsider. I looked, down at our joined hands, his scarred and powerful, mine small and calloused from years of herb work, 2 people who shouldn't fit together by any conventional measure. I'm certain, I signed, though I reserve the right to change my mind if you turn out to be secretly terrible. His laugh was sudden and genuine. Fair enough. I promise to reveal my terrible qualities gradually, so as not to overwhelm you. As Darius led me from the study, I heard Alpha Marcus's voice, low and angry, addressing Theron. You've put me in an impossible position, my king. You put yourself there, Theron replied calmly, by allowing abuse to flourish in your pack. Consider this a lesson in treating all pack members with dignity, regardless of rank. The door closed, cutting off whatever response Marcus might have made. Darius guided me through the pack house with courteous efficiency. We passed pack members who stopped to stare, their shock evident. Word had clearly spread from the marketplace. The mute. Omega was leaving with the Alpha King. I could only imagine what stories were being spun, what explanations people were creating to make sense of the impossible. My quarters were in the oldest part of the building, a small room I shared with 2 other Omegas who worked in the kitchens. They weren't there now, thankfully. I wasn't sure I could handle their questions or reactions. I owned very little. A change of clothes, my grandmother's silver hairbrush, the leather journal that served as my voice with those who couldn't sign, a small wooden box containing pressed flowers my mother had collected before she died, and my herb-gathering tools. Everything that mattered to me fit into a single worn travel bag. Darius waited patiently by the door, his expression carefully neutral. He was a large man, built like a warrior, but his eyes held a kindness that reminded me of Theron. When I finished packing, he spoke quietly. "For what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. The Alpha. King is a good male, fierce, but fair. He'll protect what's his." "Thank you," I signed, then remembered he likely couldn't understand. But he surprised me. "You're welcome," he replied, his pronunciation of the sign language phrase accented but clear. "Theron's been teaching us basics. Said, it was important we could communicate with our future Luna, at least minimally. The casual way," he said. Future Luna made my head spin. Luna, the Alpha's mate, the pack's mother figure, the second highest rank possible, me. It was absurd, impossible. And yet, as we made our way back through the pack house, I felt something stirring in my chest that I hadn't experienced in 5 long years. Hope. Dangerous, fragile hope. We emerged into the main hall to find a small crowd had gathered. Cassandra stood near the front, her face a mask of barely contained fury. Around her, I recognized other faces, some sympathetic, others openly hostile, many simply curious. Theron stood at the center, apparently, unbothered by the attention, speaking with his third, a woman, with silver-streaked black hair and eyes that missed nothing. He looked up as I approached, and something in his expression softened. "Ready?" he signed. I nodded, clutching my bag tightly. "A moment, my king," a voice called from the crowd. Old Mara, one of the pack's elders, stepped forward. Her weathered face was unreadable as she approached. She'd always been kind to me, in her way. She'd been the one to teach me how to make the most effective fever reducers, how to identify poisonous plants by touch in the dark. "Lyra, child," she said, looking directly at me rather than through me. "Is this truly what you want? You're not being coerced?" I appreciated the question, the acknowledgement that my choice mattered. "It's what I want," I signed clearly, then reached for my journal to write so she could understand. "I choose this. I choose to leave." Mara studied the words, then nodded slowly. "Then go with my blessing." She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small cloth bundle. "Take this. Bloodroot, nightshade, and silver sage, a protection charm. The old ways for safe travel." My throat tightened with unexpected emotion as I accepted the bundle. "Thank you," I signed, wishing she could understand the depth of gratitude behind the simple gesture. She seemed to understand anyway. "Be well, child. Be happy. That's all I've ever wished for you." As we moved toward the exit, Cassandra's voice rang out, sharp with malice. "She'll embarrass you, my king. A mute Omega as Luna. The other packs will laugh at you. She's nothing but a broken, worthless." The crack of Theron's hand slamming against the wall next to Cassandra's head echoed through the hall. He hadn't touched her, but the threat was unmistakable. "Listen carefully," he said, his voice a low growl that raised the hair on the back of my neck. "Because I will say this only once. Lyra is under my protection now. Any insult to her is an insult to me. Any threat to her will be met with the full force of my authority." His golden eyes blazed as he leaned closer to Cassandra, who had gone pale with fear. "And if I hear that you or anyone from this pack has attempted to harm her, interfere with her, or spread malicious rumors about her, I will return, and I will make you regret ever learning to speak." He straightened, his gaze sweeping the assembled pack members. "That applies to all of you. Lyra Ashwood is mine, my mate, my chosen, my future Luna. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly." Silence greeted his declaration. Even the boldest wolves seemed to have lost their voices in the face of his barely leashed fury. Satisfied, Theron turned to me, his expression transforming back to gentleness. "Shall we?" I glanced back one last time at the pack that had sheltered me but never truly accepted me. At the faces I'd seen every day for 5 years, most of which had looked through me rather than at me. I felt no great attachment pulling me back, no deep sorrow at leaving. What I felt was relief. "Let's go," I signed. Theron's hand found mine, solid and warm, as he led me out of the Silvercrest pack house into the fading afternoon light. 3 horses waited in the courtyard, held by a young male from Theron's pack. The Alpha King mounted first, then reached down to pull me up behind him with effortless strength. I'd never ridden a horse before. Omegas typically traveled by foot or wagon if they traveled at all. The height was dizzying, the animal's powerful muscles shifting beneath us. "Hold on to me," Theron signed with one hand before gathering the reins. "We have a long ride ahead." I wrapped my arms around his waist, feeling the solidity of him, the warmth that seemed to radiate from his body. My wolf, who had been so quiet for so long, stirred with unmistakable interest. "Mate," she whispered in my mind, her voice rusty from disuse. "Finally, mate." As we rode out through the pack's territory gates, I looked back one final time. Silvercrest lay behind us, its stone buildings and familiar paths already beginning to feel like a dream or perhaps a nightmare from which I was finally waking. Ahead lay unknown territory, a new pack, a new life, a mate bond with an Alpha King who seemed too good to be true. And for the first time in 5 years, I felt something other than resignation. I felt anticipation. Whatever came next, I would face it not as a broken Omega, but as someone who had been seen, valued, and chosen by one of the most powerful wolves in all the territories. The journey had only just begun. We rode through the night, the horses' hooves finding purchase on forest paths illuminated by a waning moon. Theron's body remained solid and warm against me, a constant reassurance as familiar territory gave way to unknown wilderness. Darius and the third, whose name I learned through signing was Saskia, flanked us, their vigilance never wavering. They scanned the darkness with the practiced awareness of warriors who had survived countless battles. After hours of silence broken only by the rhythmic sounds of travel, Theron's hand rose, gesturing for us to stop. We'd reached a small clearing where a stream burbled over smooth stones, the water catching fragments of moonlight. "We'll rest here until dawn," he said aloud, then turned slightly to sign to me. "You must be exhausted, and probably sore from riding." I was both, though I'd been trying not to show it. My muscles ached from the unfamiliar position, and my mind felt stretched thin from the whirlwind of the day's events. "I'm fine," I signed, perhaps a bit too quickly. His eyebrow rose skeptically as he dismounted, then reached up to help me down. His hand spanned my waist, lowering me gently to the ground. When my legs nearly buckled stiff from hours of riding, he steadied me with easy strength. "That's what I thought," he signed with a hint of amusement. "Saskia will help you get comfortable. There's no shame in admitting when you're hurting, Lyra." The use of my name, signed with such casual familiarity, sent an unexpected warmth through me. In Silvercrest, most people had simply gestured in my direction, or called me Omega, if they bothered to address me at all. Saskia approached, her expression softening in a way that transformed her severe features. "Come, little one. Let's get you settled while the males handle camp duties." She guided me to a spot near the stream, where moss created a natural cushion against the earth. From her pack, she withdrew a thick traveling cloak, which she spread as a makeshift bed. "First time leaving your birth territory?" she asked as she worked. I nodded, then reached for my journal to write. "First time traveling at all, really. Omegas don't usually leave packlands." Saskia's expression darkened as she read my words. "That's going to change in the Northern Kingdom. Theron's been working to reform a lot of the old traditions around rank. Omega isn't a prison sentence in our pack, it's just a designation of natural strengths." "Really?" I signed, hoping she might understand at least that simple question. She must have recognized the gesture's meaning because she nodded firmly. "Really. We have Omegas who serve on the council, who lead training sessions in healing and diplomacy, who are valued for their unique perspectives." She paused, meeting my gaze directly. "And soon we'll have one as Luna. That will accelerate changes considerably." Luna. The word still felt surreal, like a title meant for someone else entirely. I watched as Theron and Darius moved efficiently through the camp setup, building a small, carefully contained fire, setting out supplies, checking the perimeter. Theron moved with a grace surprising for someone his size, every action purposeful and controlled. He caught me watching and signed across the distance. Hungry? I hadn't realized I was until he mentioned it. The meal I'd eaten was a hurried breakfast of stale bread hours before the marketplace incident. My stomach chose that moment to growl audibly. Theron's smile was visible even in the firelight. He rummaged through a pack and produced travel rations, dried meat, hard cheese, preserved fruit, and dense whey bread. Simple fare, but it looked like a feast to my empty stomach. He brought the food to where I sat with Saskia, settling beside me with easy familiarity. The casual way he entered my space should have felt presumptuous, but instead it felt right, natural. My wolf certainly thought so. She was more alert than she'd been in years, practically preening at the alpha's proximity. Down, I told her silently. We barely know him. Mate, she insisted stubbornly. Know enough. As I ate, Theron signed a question. Tell me about your healing work. Darius said you have a reputation that extends beyond Silvercrest. I don't know about reputation, I signed, surprised by the question. But I've studied since I was young. My mother was a healer before she died. She taught me to read plants, to understand what the body needs. Your mother, he prompted gently. The rogue attack that killed your parents, that's when you lost your voice? I nodded, my appetite suddenly diminishing. The memory was 5 years old, but it remained vivid, the screams, the blood, the way my mother had pushed me into the root cellar before the rogues broke through our door. I'd tried to scream warnings, to call for help, but when I'd finally crawled out hours later to find my parents' bodies torn and broken, my voice had simply stopped, as if the horror had severed some essential connection between my mind and my throat. You don't have to talk about it if it's painful, Theron signed, his expression sympathetic. It's not that, I signed slowly, trying to articulate something I'd never fully expressed. It's just that everyone always assumed losing my voice made me less, made me broken. They saw what I couldn't do instead of what I could. What can you do? He asked, genuine interest in his expression. The question caught me off guard. No one had ever asked that before. I can listen, I signed. Really listen, without waiting for my turn to speak. I can read people's body language, their micro-expressions. I notice things others miss because I'm not distracted by filling silence with words. I paused, then continued more boldly. I can communicate complex medical instructions through sign language that's more precise than spoken explanations. I can work in absolute quiet, which is useful during delicate procedures. And I can make anyone feel heard, because I know what it's like to go unheard. Theron studied me with those intense amber eyes, and I realized I'd revealed more in those few signs than I'd shared with anyone in years. Those are considerable strengths, he signed. Silvercrest's loss is very much my gain. Heat crept up my neck. Compliments were foreign territory, and I wasn't. I'm sure how to navigate them. Why did you learn sign language? I asked, deflecting attention from myself. You mentioned your sister, but most alphas wouldn't take the time, even for family. Pain flickered across his features before he controlled it. My sister Lyra lost her hearing when she was 7, the same rogue attack that killed our parents. I was 15, suddenly responsible for her and for a pack in crisis. His hands moved with careful deliberation, the signs weighted with memory. She withdrew completely at first, stopped communicating, stopped trying. She thought her deafness made her a burden, especially on a new alpha struggling to establish authority. His jaw tightened. I couldn't let her disappear like that. So I found teachers, learned sign language, and made it clear that anyone in leadership positions would learn it too. It became pack law accessibility wasn't optional. Where is she now? I signed. Mated to my beta Darius, he replied, warmth entering his expression. She leads our pack's education programs and has become one of my most valued advisors. Turns out that when you give people the tools to be heard, they have quite a lot to say. The parallel wasn't lost on me. He'd saved his sister from isolation. Was he trying to do the same for me? I'm not a project, I signed, needing him to understand. If you're doing this out of pity or some savior complex, stop, he signed firmly, his hand catching mine and holding it still. Look at me, Lyra. I did, finding his gaze intense and unwavering. This isn't pity. This isn't me saving you. This is me recognizing my mate, the person my wolf has been searching for without even realizing it. Yes, I was drawn to you initially because I saw someone being treated the way my sister had been, but what I feel now." He pressed my hand to his chest, where I could feel his heart beating strong and steady. "That's not pity. That's recognition. That's destiny. That's the bond pulling us together despite logic and rank and convention." My breath caught. Through his shirt, I could feel warmth radiating from his skin, could sense the truth in his words through some instinct I didn't fully understand. "I'm scared," I admitted, the signs small and vulnerable. "What if I can't be what you need? What if the pack rejects me like Silvercrest did? Then we'll deal with it together," he signed. "But I don't think that will happen. My pack values strength in all its forms, and you, Lyra Ashwood, are far stronger than you realize." Before I could respond, Saskia called from across the fire. "Alpha, we should discuss tomorrow's route. The northern pass may still be snowed in." Theron squeezed my hand once more before releasing it. "Get some rest. We have a long day ahead tomorrow, and I promise you'll want to be alert for your first sight of Stormwatch Keep." "Stormwatch Keep? Home," he signed simply. "Your new home." As he moved to consult with Saskia and Darius, I lay back on the cloak, staring up at unfamiliar stars, through gaps in the forest canopy. Everything had changed in the span of hours. This morning, I'd been invisible, insignificant, resigned to a life of shadows and silence. Tonight, I was traveling to a new territory with an Alpha King who called me his mate, who spoke my language literally and figuratively, who looked at me and saw strength instead of deficiency. It felt like a dream, or perhaps like waking from a nightmare into something that might eventually become real. My wolf stirred contentedly, more settled than she'd been since before the attack that stole my voice. "Home," she whispered, echoing Theron's sign. Finally going home. I wasn't sure I believed that yet, but as I drifted toward sleep, listening to the low murmur of conversation from the other side of the fire, and feeling safer than I had in 5 long years, I let myself hope. Maybe, just maybe, I really could find a place where silence wasn't treated as a deficit, where being different didn't mean being less, where I could finally stop apologizing for existing and start discovering who I might become when I was truly seen. We crossed into Northern Kingdom territory late the following afternoon. I felt the change immediately, not just in the landscape, though the mountains grew more dramatic and the forests denser. There was something in the air itself, a quality of power and protection that spoke of strong borders and vigilant guardians. Theron noticed my reaction, signing, "The pack wards. Every member contributes to them, which is why they're so strong. When you're formally accepted, you'll add your essence too." "I've never felt anything like this," I signed back, awed by the sensation. Silvercrest's borders always felt thin, porous. His expression darkened. "That's concerning. A pack's wards should be one of their strongest defenses." He made a mental note gesture. "I'll have Saskia look into it discreetly. Weak wards can indicate internal problems." As we traveled deeper into his territory, I began to see signs of habitation. Hunting parties that stopped to bow respectfully to their alpha, their eyes curious but not hostile as they took in the sight of me riding with him. A patrol that fell in behind us for a while, providing additional protection though they didn't sense any immediate threat. A small farming settlement where children stopped their play to wave enthusiastically at the passing Alpha King. Everyone who saw us stared, of course. An unknown Omega riding with their alpha was noteworthy. But unlike the hostile scrutiny I'd endured in Silvercrest, these looks held primarily curiosity and interest. "They're wondering who you are," Theron signed. "Tomorrow, after you've rested, I'll formally introduce you to the pack leadership. But tonight, I want you to settle in without pressure." "Will they accept me?" I asked, voicing the fear that had been growing all day. "Some immediately, some eventually, perhaps a few never," he signed honestly. "But I'm not asking their permission, Lyra. I'm informing them of reality. You're my mate. That's not up for debate or vote." His certainty should have been comforting, but I couldn't shake the anxiety. I'd been the lowest-ranked wolf in Silvercrest for years. The thought of suddenly becoming Luna, second only to the Alpha himself, felt like being asked to fly when I'd only ever crawled. As if sensing my spiraling thoughts, Theron slowed his horse, allowing Darius and Saskia to ride ahead. Once we had relative privacy, he signed, "Talk to me. What's really frightening you?" "Everything," I admitted. "I don't know how to be Luna. I don't know pack law or diplomatic protocols. I can't even speak to make formal announcements. Or, stop, he signed gently. You're thinking of Luna as a role you have to perform perfectly from day one. That's not how it works. Then how does it work? You grow into it, he signed. With support, training, and time. My mother always said being Luna wasn't about being perfect, it was about being present. About caring enough to try, even when you fail. He guided his horse closer until our legs nearly touched. And you won't be alone. Alara will help you. Saskia will help you. I will help you. This isn't a test you can fail, Lyra. It's a partnership we'll build together. His words eased something tight in my chest. But before I could respond, we crested a ridge, and the view beyond stole my breath. Stormwatch Keep rose from the mountainside like it had grown there naturally, a fortress of dark stone that seemed to merge with the cliff face itself. Multiple towers reached toward the sky, their height dizzying. Thick walls enclosed what looked like a small city within, with buildings visible beyond the outer fortifications. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, and apparently, it was about to become my home. Welcome to Stormwatch, Theron signed, pride evident in his expression. The Northern Kingdom's heart and your new home. As we descended toward the massive gates, I saw guards snap to attention. The portcullis rose smoothly, well-maintained, and efficient. Inside the walls, the courtyard bustled with activity that slowed and stopped as people registered their Alpha's return and registered the Omega riding with him. Theron dismounted, then reached up to help me down. But this time, instead of simply steadying me, he kept his hands at my waist, making our connection unmistakable to the assembled pack members. Courage, he signed with one hand. I'm right here. A woman emerged from the keep's main entrance, moving with purpose and grace. She was beautiful in a striking way, sharp features softened by warm brown eyes, auburn hair braided elaborately. She wore clothing that marked her as high-ranking, and she moved with the confidence of someone comfortable with authority. But what caught my attention was the way she looked at Theron, not with romantic interest, but with deep familial affection. She reached us and immediately began signing as she spoke. Brother, you're late. I was beginning to worry. This is Alara. Theron signed to me. My sister and Darius's mate. Alara, this is Lyra Ashwood, my mate. Alara's eyes widened, darting between Theron and me. Then a smile broke across her face, genuine, delighted surprise. Finally, she said and signed simultaneously. I'd almost given up hope you'd find your mate. She turned to me, her expression warm. Welcome to Stormwatch, Lyra. I'm so glad you're here. The acceptance in her voice, the easy way she switched between signing and speaking to include both of us, made my eyes prickle with unexpected tears. Thank you, I signed, overwhelmed. Oh no, you're exhausted and probably overwhelmed, Alara said, immediately shifting into what I would come to recognize as her managing mode. She linked her arm through mine with easy familiarity. Theron, you go handle whatever alpha business can't wait. I'm taking Lyra to her chambers, getting her fed and bathed, and then she's going to rest. You can do your formal introductions tomorrow. But Theron began to protest. Tomorrow, Alara repeated firmly, her signs brooking no argument. She's been through enough for one day. Let her breathe before you throw her into pack politics. To my surprise, the fearsome Alpha King actually looked chagrined. She's right. I tend to forget that not everyone has my stamina. I'll be fine, I signed. Though truthfully, Alara's plan sounded wonderful. No, she's right, Theron signed. Get settled tonight. Tomorrow we'll handle everything else together. He turned to his sister. Take care of her, Alara. She's had a rough few years. I gathered that from the way she flinches when people move too quickly, Alara said quietly, her expression compassionate. Don't worry, brother. I know how to help someone find their footing in a new place. As Alara led me toward the keep's entrance, I glanced back at Theron. He watched us go, his expression unreadable, but his eyes never leaving me. Through the bond I didn't yet fully understand, I felt something reassurance, maybe, or promise. A wordless communication that said I wasn't alone, even as I walked away from him into unknown territory. The inside of Stormwatch Keep was as impressive as its exterior. The great hall soared overhead, its ceiling supported by massive beams carved with pack history. Tapestries depicting battles and celebrations lined the walls. Everything spoke of age, strength, and permanence. It's overwhelming at first, Alara said, still signing as she spoke. I remember when Theron first brought me here after becoming Alpha. I was terrified, but you get used to it. It becomes home. We climbed a wide staircase to the upper levels, passing pack members who bowed respectfully to Alara and looked at me with open curiosity. The Luna's chambers, Alara explained as we reached a heavy wooden door. They've been empty since our mother died, but I had them prepared when Theron sent word he was bringing you. She pushed open the door, revealing a suite of rooms that took my breath away. The main chamber was larger than my entire quarters in Silvercrest had been. A massive 4-poster bed dominated one wall, draped in deep blue fabrics. Windows overlooked the mountains, currently painted in sunset colors. A sitting area with comfortable chairs surrounded a fireplace where a fire already crackled welcomingly. Through an open doorway, I glimpsed a bathing room with a large copper tub. This is too much, I signed, feeling overwhelmed. You're the future, Luna, Alara said firmly. And even if you weren't, you're Theron's mate. That alone entitles you to the best we can offer. She guided me to sit in one of the chairs. Now, let me tell you how this is going to work. She settled across from me, her expression kind but businesslike. Tonight, you rest. Bath, food, sleep in whatever order you prefer. Tomorrow morning, you'll meet with me and Saskia. We'll start teaching you what you need to know about pack structure, traditions, and your role. Nothing overwhelming, just foundations. And then, I signed. Then tomorrow evening, there will be a formal dinner where Theron introduces you to the pack leadership. It will be intimidating, but I'll be right there with you, translating and supporting you. After that, she smiled. After that, we figure out the rest together. Why are you being so kind to me? I signed, the question escaping before I could stop it. You don't know me. Alara's expression softened. Why, I know what it's like to suddenly lose the ability to communicate the way others expect. I know what it's like to feel like a burden, because you're different. And I know what it's like to have someone believe in you when you don't believe in yourself. She reached across and gently touched my hand. Theron saved me from drowning in isolation. If his mate needs the same thing, I'm honored to help. The sincerity in her signs made my throat tight. I'd expected resistance, skepticism, maybe polite hostility. Instead, I'd found immediate acceptance and support. Thank you, I signed, pouring all my gratitude into the gesture. Save your thanks, Alara said with a small smile. Wait until after you've met the Pack Council. Some of them are traditional in their views. They'll need convincing. Will they challenge the mating? I asked, anxiety spiking again. They might question it, Alara admitted, but they can't actually prevent it. Fated mate bonds are sacred, even the most traditional wolves acknowledge that. They might make things difficult, but ultimately, Theron's word is law. She stood, moving toward a wardrobe I hadn't noticed. I had these brought from storage. They were our mother's. She was about your size. She withdrew several dresses in rich fabrics. For tomorrow's dinner, you'll need something that commands respect. As she laid out the options, I felt reality settling over me like the fine fabrics she displayed. This was happening. Tomorrow, I would stand before the Northern Kingdom's leadership as their alpha's mate. And somehow, I would have to prove I was worthy of the title. Despite being everything traditional pack culture said a Luna shouldn't be mute, Omega, an outsider with no political connections or powerful family. What if I fail? I signed, voicing my deepest fear. Alara looked at me with those warm brown eyes. Then you get up and try again. That's what leaders do, Lyra. We fail, we learn, we grow. The only true failure is not trying at all. She moved toward the door, then paused. The bathwater should still be hot. Take your time. Food will be brought up within the hour. And Lyra? She waited until I met her gaze. My brother doesn't make mistakes about what matters. If he says you're his mate, if he chose to bring you here against all convention, it's because he sees something worth fighting for. Trust his judgment, even if you don't trust your own. Yet. After she left, I stood in the center of the Luna's chambers. My chambers now, apparently trying to process everything that had happened in less than 24 hours. Yesterday morning, I'd been invisible, powerless, resigned to a life of scrubbing herbs and being mocked in marketplaces. Tonight, I stood in a suite of rooms larger than any building I'd ever inhabited, wearing the title of future Luna to one of the most powerful packs in all the territories. My wolf stirred contentedly. Told you, mate takes care of us. This isn't about being taken care of, I told her. This is about becoming something I never imagined I could be. Same thing, she replied simply. Mate sees us, really sees us. Rest of pack will learn to see us too. Her confidence was touching, if unwarranted. But as I sank into the hot bath water, feeling days of travel and years of tension slowly dissolving, I allowed myself to imagine that she might be right. Maybe I really could do this. Maybe silence didn't have to mean powerless. Maybe I could learn to be the Luna Theron seemed to think I already was. Tomorrow would bring challenges, doubt, and probably more than a few wolves who would question my worthiness. But tonight, for the first time in 5 years, I fell asleep feeling something other than resigned defeat. I fell asleep feeling possibility. Dawn arrived with golden light spilling across unfamiliar luxury. For a confused heartbeat, I couldn't place where I was the elegant furnishings, the mountain vista through tall windows, the weight of silk sheets against my skin. Then memory flooded back. Stormwatch Keep, Northern Kingdom territory. Theron, my mate. The word still felt foreign, like borrowed clothing that didn't quite fit. Yet my wolf had no such hesitation. She'd been awake since before sunrise, restless with eagerness. Need to find him, she pressed. Need mate close. Soon, I promised her. First, we have preparations to make. A gentle knock preceded the door opening. The young woman from yesterday, Mira, entered bearing a laden tray, her smile warm and genuine. Good morning, Luna, she greeted me. Lady Alara mentioned you'd likely wake early. She's asked me to help you dress and break your fast before she arrives. She set the tray down, uncovering dishes that made my stomach growl despite my nerves. Fresh berries, warm bread with butter and preserves, sliced meats, soft cheese, and herbal tea that smelled of chamomile and mint. Too generous, I signed automatically. The alpha was quite insistent, Mira said, somehow catching my meaning from the gesture alone. He wants you properly nourished before today's lessons begin. She smiled conspiratorially. Between us, I think he's worried you'll forget to eat when you're nervous. He wasn't wrong. In Silvercrest, I'd often skipped meals when anxiety took hold, my stomach too unsettled to accept food. While I ate, Mira moved efficiently around the room, selecting clothing from the wardrobe and laying out what I'd need. She worked with the comfortable confidence of someone who knew her role well, chatting pleasantly about the keep's routines and various pack members I'd soon meet. The kitchen staff is already making wagers about how long before you win over Elder Rowan, she mentioned with amusement. Cook gives it 3 weeks. The scullery maid says 3 days. I've bet on 3 months he's remarkably stubborn. The casual mention of pack members speculating about me should have increased my anxiety. Instead, it felt oddly normalizing. They were curious, yes, but not hostile. Interested rather than dismissive. When Alara arrived an hour later, Saskia accompanied her. Both women radiated purpose and energy that made me feel inadequately caffeinated by comparison. Ready to begin? Alara asked, signing as she spoke. We have considerable ground to cover before tonight. Tonight? I signed, confused. I thought the formal dinner was tonight? It is, Saskia confirmed. Which is why we're starting now. You need context before you face the council. They settled me at the small table, spreading out maps and documents I recognized as official pack records. First, understand the structure, Alara began. Theron rules as Alpha King over the Northern Kingdom, an alliance of 12 smaller packs. Each maintains some autonomy but answers to his authority on matters of territory, justice, and external relations. Quote, she pointed to different regions on the map. Some packs joined willingly when he took power. Others required persuasion. A few still harbor resentment about answering to someone they consider an outsider. Theron mentioned he wasn't born to this pack, I signed. He wasn't, Saskia said. He earned his position through strength, strategy, and proving himself worthy during a succession crisis. The previous alpha died without clear heir, leaving a power vacuum. Theron stepped in, challenged the 3 strongest contenders, and won, decisively. How old was he? I asked. 19. Alara said quietly. Barely more than a boy, suddenly responsible for hundreds of lives and 12 fractious packs on the brink of civil war. The information reframed everything I knew about Theron. I'd assumed he'd inherited his position through bloodline, the usual way. Instead, he'd fought for it at an age when most wolves were still training. He's built stability from chaos, Alara continued. But it's been 6 years of constant work. Some wolves still question his legitimacy. Others resent his reforms. He's changed laws about omega treatment, female warrior training, interpack mating, everything traditional wolves consider sacred. And now he's chosen an omega as Luna. I signed, understanding dawning. I'm another reform they'll resist. Exactly, Saskia said bluntly. To them, you represent everything Theron's changed. They'll see you as proof he's gone too far. The weight of that settled over me like stone. I wasn't just becoming Luna, I was becoming a symbol of transformation half the pack would oppose. Why tell me this now? I signed. Right before I have to face them? Because you need to understand the stakes, Alara replied gently. Tonight isn't just about you proving yourself worthy. It's about Theron's vision for the pack's future. If you succeed, his reforms continue. If you fail, everything he's built becomes vulnerable, I finished. They both nodded. No pressure then, I signed with dark humor. For hours, they drilled me on pack hierarchy, the council members' backgrounds and loyalties, proper protocol for formal dinners, and the specific challenges I'd likely face. Elder Rowan will be your primary opposition, Saskia warned. He's served this pack for 40 years, through 3 alphas. He believes rank is divinely ordained. Alphas lead because the goddess wills it. Omegas serve because that's their purpose. How do I counter that? I signed. You don't, Alara said. Not directly. Arguing theology with Rowan is futile. Instead, you demonstrate competence. Show him that regardless of rank, you have valuable contributions to make. And if that doesn't work, then you outlast him, Saskia said pragmatically. He's 73. Time is on your side. The brutal calculus of it startled a laugh from me, silent, but genuine. Around midday, Theron appeared at the door. He'd changed from his traveling clothes into something more formal but comfortable dark fabrics that emphasized his powerful build without the restrictive formality of full ceremonial dress. His eyes found mine immediately, and I felt the bond between us pulse with warmth. How is my mate handling her first morning? He signed. Overwhelmed but surviving, I replied honestly. He turned to his sister and Saskia. May I steal her for lunch? I promise to return her before evening preparations. Only if you promise not to let her skip eating, Alara said sternly. She needs strength for tonight. I would. Never. Theron signed with exaggerated innocence. You would and have, Alara countered. Remember last winter when you got so focused on border negotiations you forgot meals for 2 straight days? That was different. It was exactly the same, Alara interrupted. Feed your mate properly, brother. That's an order. The casual way they bickered, the obvious affection beneath the teasing, made something in my chest loosen. This was family, real family, with all its comfortable friction and deep loyalty. Theron offered his arm, which I accepted gratefully. As we left my chambers, I noticed how pack members we passed immediately showed respect, bowing heads, murmuring greetings, stepping aside to clear our path. But their eyes always found me after, curiosity burning bright. They're staring again, I signed. Can you blame them? Theron signed back. You're the first Luna in 16 years, the first Omega Luna in pack history, the first mute wolf to hold any ranked position. Of course, they're curious. It makes me feel like a curiosity, an oddity to be examined. He stopped walking, turning to face me fully. You are unique. That's different from being odd. Unique means there's no one else quite like you, which makes you valuable, not deficient. The distinction settled something anxious in my chest. He led me to a small private dining room I hadn't seen before, intimate rather than grand, with windows overlooking the training grounds where I could see warriors drilling in formation. Lunch had been laid out already. Roasted chicken with herbs, fresh vegetables, bread still warm from ovens, and fruit preserves that tasted of summer. I wanted time alone with you before tonight's performance, Theron said, signing as he spoke, to make certain you're truly all right with everything happening. I'm terrified, I admitted, but also determined. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, he confirmed. That's exactly how I felt before my first council meeting as Alpha, terrified I'd fail, determined to succeed anyway. Did you fail? Spectacularly, he said with a wry smile. I was too aggressive, too defensive, made assumptions about loyalties that proved completely wrong. Elder Rowan walked out halfway through. But you're still alpha, I pointed out, because I learned from it. Failed again, learned again, gradually improved until I could navigate council politics without creating disasters. He reached across the table, his hand finding mine. You won't be perfect tonight, Lyra. No one expects that except possibly you. Elder Rowan will expect perfection. Elder Rowan expected me to fail completely and step down within a year, Theron countered. His expectations are irrelevant. What matters is that you show up, engage honestly, and let them see who you actually are. What if who I am isn't enough? His expression intensified. Then they're fools. But I don't think that will happen. I think once they actually interact with you, rather than their preconceptions about mute omegas, most will recognize your value. You have a lot of faith in them. I have appropriate faith in you, he corrected. They'll follow where that leads. We finished lunch while he told me more about the council members I'd meet tonight. Commander Fenris, who valued competence above all else. Healer Cordelia, who'd apparently heard impressive things about my skills. Darius and Saskia, who I already knew. Elder Rowan, who remained the wild card. There's one more thing you should know, Theron said as we prepared to return to my chambers. The council will expect confirmation that the mate bond is genuine. How do they confirm that? Typically through observation of our interaction. True mates have recognizable dynamics, body language synchronization, protective instincts, the ability to communicate complex ideas with minimal words. He paused. But there's also a more direct method, which is mental communication, if we can demonstrate the relocation. Bond allows us to share thoughts. That's considered irrefutable proof. My pulse quickened. Can we do that? The bond feels strong, but I haven't heard your thoughts in my mind. That's because we haven't opened the channel fully yet, he explained. It requires both parties to consciously lower their mental barriers. It's intimate more so than physical touch in some ways. I won't pressure you into it. But it would help tonight, I signed, if we could show them we truly are bonded. It would, he admitted. But only if you're comfortable. There's no shame in needing more time. I considered it. The thought of Theron in my mind hearing my thoughts, my fears, my doubts was terrifying. But perhaps no more terrifying than standing before skeptical council members who assumed I was unworthy. Teach me, I signed. How do I lower the barriers? Relief and warmth flooded his expression. It's easier to show than explain. May I? At my nod, he moved closer, his hand coming up to cup the jam. Side of my face with surprising gentleness. Close your eyes, he instructed. Feel for the bond. It should be like a golden thread connecting us. Can you sense it? I could. It pulsed with warmth and light, stretching between our souls. Now imagine following that thread toward me. Don't push or force. Just let your consciousness drift along the connection until you reach. Oh, there. The moment our minds touched, I gasped. It wasn't painful or overwhelming, more like stepping from a quiet room into gentle music. I could sense his presence, distinct from mine but harmonious with it. Can you hear me? His thought came clear and warm, wrapping around my consciousness like an embrace. Yes, I thought back, marveling at the ease of it. This is incredible. This is what true mates can share, he replied. Not just thoughts, but emotions, sensations, understanding that transcends language. He was right. Through the connection, I could feel his confidence in me, his affection, his fierce protectiveness balanced by respect for my autonomy, and underneath it all, a warmth that might have been love, though neither of us had named it yet. Tonight will be difficult, he sent, but I'll be right there with you. If you need support, just reach through the bond. Thank you, I sent back, pouring gratitude into the thought. When we separated, both slightly breathless from the intimacy of the connection, his eyes were bright. That will certainly convince Elder Rowan, he said, signing with one hand while the other remained at my face. True mate mental bonds are nearly impossible to fake. So we just demonstrated it was real? We just demonstrated it's remarkably strong, he corrected. Most newly bonded mates need weeks to achieve that level of clarity. We did it in minutes. The pride in his voice made warmth spread through my chest. The afternoon passed in a blur of final preparations. Ilara and Mira helped me dress in one of the formal gowns from the wardrobe deep midnight. Blue that Alara insisted made me look regal but approachable. My hair was styled more elaborately than I'd ever worn it, woven with silver threads that caught the light. Mira applied subtle cosmetics that enhanced rather than masked, her hands gentle and skilled. "You look every inch a Luna," Alara pronounced when they'd finished. "Now you just need to believe it." "Working on that part," I signed. "Fake it until it becomes real," she advised. "That's what we all do." As sunset painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, I stood before the mirror, hardly recognizing the woman reflected there. She looked confident, elegant, worthy of standing beside an alpha king. I just hoped the illusion would hold through dinner. The formal dining hall felt smaller than I remembered, though that might have been the weight of scrutiny pressing down from all sides. 7 places had been set at the long table, the alpha king at the head, his Luna to the right, council members filling the remaining seats. I arrived with Alara, who squeezed my hand once before we entered. "You've got this," she signed. "Just be yourself." Easy to say, harder to execute when yourself felt like an imposter wearing borrowed finery. The council members were already assembled when we entered. Saskia and Darius I knew, their familiar faces providing islands of calm. Commander Fenris was exactly as Theron had described, weathered and scarred, with eyes that assessed threats automatically. Healer Cordelia studied me with professional interest rather than judgment. And Elder Rowan watched with an expression that suggested he'd already decided I was unworthy and was simply waiting for confirmation. Theron stood as I entered, his formal attire making him look even more imposing than usual. But his eyes softened when they found me, and I felt the bond pulse with reassurance. He offered his hand, guiding me to the seat at his right. The position of honor. The Luna's place. I sat with as much grace as I could, muster, hyper-aware of every movement, every breath, every eye tracking my actions. "Thank you all for attending," Theron began, his voice carrying natural authority. "I've asked you here to formally introduce my mate and future Luna. I expect her to be treated with the respect her position commands." "Of course, Alpha," Saskia said immediately. Darius and Fenris echoed the sentiment. Cordelia inclined her head in agreement. Elder Rowan remained silent, his weathered face unreadable. "Lyra," Theron continued, turning to me, "would you like to introduce yourself?" This was the moment we'd prepared for. I stood, my hands rising to sign as Alara positioned discreetly near the wall translated. "I am Lyra Ashwood, formerly of Silvercrest Pack. I lost my voice 5 years ago during the rogue attack that killed my parents. Since then, I've served as a healer's assistant, developing skills in herbal medicine and trauma treatment." I paused, gathering courage for the harder part. "I know my appointment as Luna is unconventional. I'm Omega ranked, I cannot speak, and I come from outside your pack. These are all legitimate concerns." Elder Rowan's eyebrows rose slightly, as if surprised I'd acknowledged the problems directly. "But I also bring unique perspectives. I've learned to observe carefully, to listen deeply, to understand what isn't said. I've survived circumstances that would have destroyed others, and I'm committed to serving this pack to the best of my abilities." I met each council member's gaze directly before concluding. "I'm not asking you to overlook my differences. I'm asking you to consider that those differences might be exactly what this pack needs." Silence greeted my signed speech. Then Fenris cleared his throat. "A fair assessment," he said gruffly. "I appreciate honesty over false modesty." "As do I," Cordelia agreed. "I'm curious about your healing background. Perhaps we could discuss your techniques?" The offer felt like acceptance, or at least willingness to consider me fairly. "She makes pretty promises," Elder Rowan finally spoke, his tone dismissive. "But how can a mute Omega fulfill a Luna's actual duties? She cannot address the pack, cannot mediate verbal disputes, cannot speak at ceremonies or diplomatic functions." The challenge hung heavy in the suddenly tense air. Theron's hand found mine under the table, squeezing once. Through our bond, I felt his silent support. "Your turn," he sent. "Show him." I stood again, holding Rowan's gaze steadily as my hands moved. "You're right that I cannot fulfill duties in traditional ways. But leadership isn't about tradition, it's about effectiveness," I continued before he could interrupt. "I can address the pack through translation, through written messages, through sign language that more wolves are learning daily. I can mediate disputes by listening carefully to all sides without my own voice interfering. and I can speak at ceremonies through representatives who will give voice to my words. My signs grew more emphatic. You measure leadership by volume. I measure it by impact. And I believe silent observation often reveals more truth than the loudest speech. Rowan's expression hardened. That's ideology, not practicality. What happens in crisis? When immediate decisions must be made and communicated? Fair question. One I'd anticipated. Now, I sent through the bond to Theron. He stood, moving to stand beside me. Elder Rowan, you question whether the mate bond is genuine, whether an Omega can truly be Luna. Allow me to demonstrate something. He turned to me, his eyes warm. Then, speaking aloud while I signed, we had a conversation. His words and my signs perfectly synchronized, as if we shared a single mind. Because in that moment, through the mental bond, we did. The bond allows us to communicate instantly, Theron explained, his words matching my signs exactly. What she thinks, I know. What I need to say, she understands before words form. We continued the demonstration, our perfect synchronization making the bond's reality undeniable. When we finished, even Rowan looked shaken. That's unprecedented clarity, Cordelia murmured. I've never seen a newly formed bond so strong. Because it's a true mate bond, Darius said quietly. The goddess's choice, not politics or convenience. Fenris studied us thoughtfully. If the Alpha King and Luna can communicate that seamlessly, her silence becomes irrelevant. The bond compensates. It was the opening I needed. My hands rose again, and Alara translated. My muteness isn't a deficit to overcome. It's a different way of engaging with the world, and this pack will be stronger for having leadership that understands multiple perspectives spoken in silent, dominant, and Omega, traditional, and reformed. You sound very certain for someone who's never led anything, Rowan challenged. And you sound very certain for someone who hasn't actually given me a chance to prove myself. I signed back, my frustration bleeding through into the gesture's sharpness. A flicker of surprise crossed Rowan's face. Then, unexpectedly, the corner of his mouth twitched. She has spine, he muttered. I'll give her that. It wasn't acceptance, but it was acknowledgement. The dinner that followed remained tense but gradually warmed as conversation flowed. Cordelia asked detailed questions about my herbal techniques. Fenris solicited my opinion on improving field medicine for warriors. Even Rowan engaged occasionally, though his comments remained pointed. By the meal's conclusion, I was exhausted but cautiously hopeful. I hadn't won them all over, certainly not Rowan, but I demonstrated competence, held my ground, and shown that silence didn't equal weakness. As the council members departed, Fenris paused before me. You did well tonight, Lady Lyra, he said formally. I look forward to your formal Luna ceremony. As do I, Cordelia added warmly. Welcome to the Northern Kingdom. Even Rowan managed a stiff nod as he left, which felt like a victory given his earlier hostility. When only Theron and I remained, I felt the weight of the evening crash over me like a wave. My hands trembled as I signed. That was terrifying. That was magnificent, Theron corrected, pulling me into his arms. You faced down one of the most stubborn wolves in the territory and held your ground. I'm so proud of you. Did I really do well? Or are you just being kind? Through the bond, he sent not words but feeling genuine pride, fierce satisfaction, deep respect. No pity, no condescension, just honest recognition of what I'd accomplished. You did well, he confirmed. And tomorrow, you'll do even better. You're going to be an extraordinary Luna, Lyra. Wrapped in his arms, feeling the bond steady between us, I let myself believe him. Maybe, just maybe, I really could do this. The week that followed exceeded every challenge I'd anticipated. Alara drilled me, relentlessly on pack protocols and history. Saskia taught me territorial boundaries and alliance politics. Cordelia integrated me into the healing halls, treating me as a colleague rather than a novice. Even Fenris sought my input on warrior medical training, implementing several of my suggestions without hesitation. The pack itself remained curious but increasingly accepting. I made a point of being visible, attending training sessions, visiting the healing halls, walking through residential areas with Theron. Each interaction, each conversation conducted through sign and translation, normalized my presence. Some wolves learned basic signs to communicate directly. Others relied on Alara or other translators. But gradually, communication stopped feeling like a barrier and started feeling like just another aspect of pack life. The night before the formal Luna ceremony, I couldn't sleep. Tomorrow, I would stand before the entire pack and claim my position officially. The weight of it felt crushing. Finally surrendering to insomnia, I left my chambers and wandered the quiet keep. My feet carried me without conscious direction to Theron's study, where light still glowed beneath the door. I knocked softly. "Enter," his voice called. He looked up from paperwork, surprise and concern flickering across his features. "Can't sleep?" I shook my head, moving to sit in the chair across from his desk. "Too many thoughts. Too many fears about tomorrow. Tell me," he signed, setting aside his work. "What if I stumble during the ceremony? What if the pack rejects me publicly? What if I forced myself to sign the deepest fear? What if you realize you made a mistake?" Theron came around the desk immediately, kneeling before my chair as had become his habit during serious conversations. "Look at me, Lyra." I did, finding his amber eyes steady and certain. "Do you remember what the Luna ceremony actually represents?" "The pack accepting their Luna," I signed. "Partially," he agreed. "But more importantly, it's the Luna accepting herself, claiming her place not because others give it to her, but because she chooses to take it." His hands moved with emphasis. "Tomorrow, the pack will witness you making that choice. They'll see you step forward and declare yourself Luna not apologetically, but with full ownership of who you are. And if I can't," I signed, "then we postpone until you can," he replied without hesitation. "But Lyra, I've watched you this week. You've already proven yourself in every way that matters. Tomorrow just makes it official." He took my hands in his. "You're already Luna. You just need to believe it yourself." His certainty, conveyed through both signs and the bond between us, slowly steadied my racing thoughts. "Will you stay with me tonight?" I signed impulsively. "Not I don't mean I know what you mean," he signed gently. "And yes, if company helps, I'm happy to provide it." We ended up in the library, fire crackling as Theron read aloud while I let the familiar rhythm of his voice wash over me. Eventually, exhaustion won. I must have dozed, because I woke being carried, my head against his chest. "Sleep," he signed with one hand. "Tomorrow, you become who you've always been, Luna." The Luna ceremony itself blurred past in a cascade of moments that felt simultaneously too fast and too slow. The great hall packed with hundreds of wolves, Theron resplendent in ceremonial attire. My own elaborate gown, heavy with history and expectation. The walk to the dais, every step weighted with significance. Kneeling before Theron, tradition demanding submission. But then his unexpected gesture kneeling in turn, declaring partnership rather than hierarchy. And finally, standing before the entire pack, my hands rising to sign my first words as Luna. "I promise to see you, all of you, to listen to those who feel unheard, to value contributions regardless of rank, to build a pack where being different is strength, not shame." The moment my signs concluded, silence held for a heartbeat that felt eternal. Then, "Luna Lyra," someone shouted from the crowd. Others picked it up, the chant building until the entire hall resonated with my name. Not mocked, celebrated, and I felt something fundamental shift inside me. Not confidence exactly, but acceptance. Of myself, my differences, my right to occupy space in the world. I was mute, I was Omega, I was Luna, and I was exactly enough. The ceremony concluded with blessings, gifts, and celebration that stretched long into the night. But the moment that mattered most came late in the evening, when a young girl approached me shyly. Her hands rose in careful signs. "Thank you, Luna. For showing me being quiet doesn't mean being weak." My throat tightened. "It never did," I signed back. "Never let anyone tell you otherwise." Later, standing with Theron on the terrace overlooking our territory, I finally allowed myself to believe. I'd found home, found purpose, found love. Most importantly, I'd found myself. And that, I realized, was everything. The council chamber hummed with controlled energy as pack representatives debated the merits of expanding our northern border patrols. I sat at Theron's right hand, the Luna's traditional position, observing the dynamics with the careful attention I'd cultivated over months of leadership. Elder Rowan was actually nodding at one of my proposals. That alone told me how drastically things had shifted since my arrival. "The Luna makes a valid point," he said grudgingly, his weathered face creased with thought. Increasing healer presence in border stations would reduce casualties significantly. We lost 3 warriors last month who might have survived with immediate treatment. Commander Fenris grunted agreement. I've reviewed Lady Lyra's medical protocols. They're sound, better than what we've been using. Through our completed mate bond, I felt Theron's satisfaction ripple like warm water. His hand found mine briefly under the table, squeezing once before returning to his papers. You've won him over completely, he sent through our mental connection. Fenris doesn't give praise lightly. Cordelia helped, I sent back honestly. She implemented most of the actual changes. You designed them, he countered. Take credit where it's due, my Luna. The casual endearment still sent warmth cascading through me, even after months of hearing it. Healer Cordelia spoke up from her position across the table. I'd also like to propose promoting Lyra's apprentice, the young girl, Maya, to junior healer status. She's showing remarkable aptitude, particularly with trauma cases. The deaf child? Rowan asked, though his tone held curiosity rather than dismissal now. The skilled healer who happens to be deaf. I corrected through Alara's translation, my signs firm but not harsh. Her disability doesn't define her capabilities. If anything, her heightened observational skills make her exceptional at reading patient distress. Rowan considered this, then nodded slowly. Approved. We need skilled healers regardless of their unique attributes. It wasn't perfect acceptance. Rowan still stumbled over acknowledging disability as neutral rather than negative. But it was progress. Remarkable progress compared to 6 months ago. The meeting continued for another hour, covering everything from winter food stores to diplomatic relations with neighboring packs. I contributed when relevant, my signs translated seamlessly by Alara, or understood directly by the growing number of council members who'd learned basic sign language. Theron had made it pack law that all ranked wolves must achieve functional sign language proficiency within a year of my appointment. Some had grumbled. Most had complied. A few had embraced it enthusiastically. The result was a pack where silence no longer equaled exclusion, where multiple forms of communication were valued equally, where being different wasn't just tolerated but genuinely accepted. When the council finally adjourned, I found myself immediately surrounded by pack members seeking my attention. A mother whose child was running a persistent fever, a warrior requesting permission to mate outside the pack, an Omega asking about education opportunities for her daughters. I handled each request with the careful attention I'd learned was essential to leadership, writing responses in my ever-present journal, signing when the recipient understood, occasionally pulling Theron or Alara in for more complex translations. An hour passed before I finally escaped to the healing halls, where I'd promised Cordelia I'd help with the afternoon's most difficult cases. Maya was already there, her hands moving in rapid sign language as she explained a treatment protocol to a young warrior with a badly infected wound. The infection has spread to the bone, she signed with clinical precision. We need to debride the dead tissue, pack it with honey and yarrow, then monitor for fever. If it doesn't improve in 3 days, amputation becomes necessary. The warrior paled but nodded understanding. Maya's hands had already moved to gather supplies, her focus absolute. I caught her attention, signing approval. Excellent assessment. You're ready for more complex cases. Her face lit with pride. Thank you, Luna. I won't disappoint you. You haven't yet, I assured her. I'm recommending you for junior healer status at next month's ceremony. The joy that flooded her expression made my chest tight. 6 months ago, Maya had been a frightened child convinced her deafness made her worthless. Now she was a confident apprentice healer with genuine talent and growing respect from the pack. Her transformation mirrored my own in ways that felt both humbling and empowering. As sunset painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, I finally made my way back to the chambers I now shared with Theron. The rooms had been redecorated to reflect both our tastes, his preference, for dark woods and practical furnishings balanced by my love of plants and natural light. It was home in a way nowhere else had ever been. I found Theron already there, changed from formal council attire into comfortable clothes, reviewing reports by the fire. He looked up as I entered, his expression softening immediately. Exhausting day? He signed. Fulfilling day, I corrected, moving to sit beside him. There's a difference. He set aside his papers, pulling me against him so my back rested against his chest. His arms came around me, solid and warm and safe. Tell me about it. He sent through our bond, the mental communication now as natural as breathing. So I did, sharing not just the day's events but my feelings about them, satisfaction at Maya's progress, frustration with a particularly stubborn case in the healing halls, amusement at one of Fenris's rare jokes during the council meeting. He listened as he always did, with complete attention and genuine interest, never dismissing my concerns or minimizing my victories, just present, engaged, supportive. "I'm proud of you," he sent when I'd finished. "You've transformed this pack in ways I couldn't have imagined." "We transformed it together," I corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without your support." "You're stronger than you realize," he replied, his arms tightening slightly. "You always have been. I just helped you see it." A knock interrupted our comfortable silence. At Theron's called permission, the door opened to admit a courier bearing an elaborate envelope sealed with unfamiliar wax. "For the Luna," the young wolf said, bowing respectfully, "from Silvercrest Pack." My stomach clenched. 6 months since I'd left, and I'd had no contact with my former pack. Part of me had hoped they'd simply forgotten about me, letting me build this new life without interference from my past. Apparently not. Theron must have sensed my anxiety through the bond because his hand found mine, squeezing reassuringly. "Want me to read it first?" I shook my head. Whatever the message contained, I needed to face it directly. The letter was written in Alpha Marcus's distinctive script, formal and carefully worded. "Luna Lyra Ashwood, it has come to our attention that you have been formally recognized as Luna of the Northern Kingdom. On behalf of Silvercrest Pack, we wish to extend our congratulations and request the honor of a diplomatic visit. Several matters require discussion, including formal recognition of your change in pack affiliation, resolution of certain misunderstandings regarding your departure, and establishment of positive relations between our territories. We propose a meeting 1 month hence at the border between our lands. We trust this will be acceptable to both you and Alpha King Theron. In service to pack unity, Alpha Marcus Silvercrest." I read it twice, trying to parse the meaning beneath the diplomatic language. Misunderstandings about my departure likely meant they wanted to save. Face reframe my escape as something less embarrassing than an Alpha King claiming an abused Omega from their territory. "What do you think?" I signed to Theron after showing him the letter. "I think Marcus has realized that offending the Northern Kingdom's Luna was politically stupid," he said aloud, his tone dry. "And now he's scrambling to repair relations before other packs hear about how poorly Silvercrest treated you. Should we meet with them?" "That's entirely your choice," Theron said firmly. "I won't pressure you either way. If you never want to see anyone from Silvercrest again, I'll send a polite refusal and that will be the end of it." I appreciated that he made it genuinely my decision, rather than offering pro forma choice while clearly preferring one option. "Part of me wants to refuse," I admitted. "Let them suffer consequences for how they treated me and others like me." "And the other part?" Theron prompted gently. "Wonders if meeting them might actually help. Show them, definitively, that I'm not broken or lesser. That silence doesn't equal weakness." I paused. "And maybe establish better treatment standards for their Omegas and disabled wolves. Use my position to create change beyond just our pack." Theron's pride flowed warm through our bond. "That's thinking like a true Luna. Using power not for revenge but for reform. So we should agree to meet?" "We should do whatever you feel is right," he corrected. "But yes, I think meeting them could be beneficial. On our terms, at a neutral location, with the understanding that you are Luna of the Northern Kingdom and will be treated with appropriate respect." The thought of facing Alpha Marcus, Beta Nightshade, and especially Cassandra, still sent anxiety spiraling through me. But I was no longer the frightened Omega who'd scrubbed marketplace stones. I was Luna. I had an Alpha King who valued me, a pack that respected me, power and position that demanded acknowledgement. Maybe it was time to show Silvercrest exactly what they'd dismissed. "Let's meet with them," I decided. "But I want Saskia and Fenris there as well as you. A show of strength, not weakness." "Agreed," Theron said. "I'll send our acceptance with conditions. They'll comply, they need this meeting more than we do." As he drafted the response, I moved to the window overlooking the territory I now helped protect. Lights glowed in hundreds of windows. Smoke rose from chimneys. The sounds of pack-life children playing, wolves calling to each other, the distant rhythm of warriors training carried on the evening air. This was mine. Not in the sense of possession, but in the deeper sense of belonging. I'd found my place in the world, discovered strength I hadn't known I possessed, built a life that honored rather than hidden my differences. And in 1 month, I'd return to the place that had tried to break me. Not as a victim seeking validation, but as Luna claiming respect that had always been my due. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, I felt anticipation sharpening to determination. Let them see what they'd missed, what they'd lost, what their cruelty and dismissal had cost them. Let them see Luna Lyra mute, Omega, and absolutely unstoppable. Theron finished the letter and came to stand beside me, his arm wrapping around my waist as we looked out at our territory together. Nervous about seeing them again? He asked through our bond. A little, I admitted, but also eager. I want them to see what I've become, what I always could have been if they'd bothered to look. They'll see, he promised. And they'll realize exactly what they lost when they failed to value you. We stood there as darkness fell, two souls bound by fate and choice, looking toward a future we were building together. I'd started this journey broken and silent, convinced I had nothing to offer. I discovered I had everything: strength, wisdom, courage, and a voice that didn't require sound to be heard. And that, I thought as Theron pressed a kiss to my temple, was the greatest triumph of all. Not changing who I was to fit others' expectations, but proving that who I'd always been was exactly enough. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.